Hello. I would like to ask you a question. And if it's okay with you, I would like you to consider how it applies to you personally. Because it's a type of question that can't really be answered in any other way. So please think about it from your first-person singular standpoint, if you are happy to do so. Just a short preliminary now, before the question. We all know that the chances of winning the lottery are very slim indeed. In the case of the British National Lottery, it's about 45 million to 1. And so bearing in mind the incredible unlikelihood of winning just one lottery, I would like to ask you to think about an event that was as unlikely as winning the lottery every consecutive week for 1,000,000 years, and yet actually happened, according to science's best understanding of how things happen. And I would like to ask if you think the event could really have happened against such odds. The event to which I refer is you. So can you believe that you came into existence against such incredible odds? Because that's the level of unlikelihood of it, according to our best understanding of DNA and biological replication. Because each one of your ancestors going back thousands of generations had to be the result of a 300 million to 1 fertilization event, which is about 6 times as unlikely as winning the lottery. Each and every one of them had to be born against those odds, or you would not exist, according to science. Imagine winning the national lottery jackpot every week for a whole year. If that happened to you, would you not find yourself questioning that it was just down to luck, even if it was proved to you that the randomness of the draw was not compromised? By the same token, do you not find it highly questionable at the very least that your actual existence could have come about against odds that are 1,000,000 times more unlikely than winning the lottery 52 times in a row? According to our current scientific understanding, the unlikelihood of your existence is on that scale. But if you find yourself doubting what science indicates, would it not follow that you would have to also question whether its explanations for your existence are entirely accurate? Or maybe you are completely happy with science's findings and not impressed at all with the idea that your birth is akin to winning a lottery. Well, there is a counter-argument which I'll explain now, and I'll give you my own take on it in a few moments. The argument goes that in order for a lottery win to be a stroke of luck, there has to be a pre-existing lottery ticket with numbers that match the winning numbers. Without that precondition, luck simply doesn't come into it. Without a matching lottery ticket, that arrangement of balls is just a brute fact, not a lucky event. You are like the lottery balls with no winning lottery ticket, in that you are just the outcome of whatever caused you. As there was no lottery ticket, for you, in the form of a prediction of your existence, you can't say that any luck was involved. To give another example, when you look up at the sky and see a cloud of a particular shape, you're not astonished that that cloud exists, you just accept that it is the result of the prevailing atmospheric conditions. It would be ridiculous for the cloud to think, how amazing that the atmospheric conditions were exactly right for me, because the cloud wasn't waiting around for the conditions to be right. It's a manifestation of those atmospheric conditions, and that is all. Likewise, you are a manifestation of the genes that happen to form you. You are not a stroke of luck, any more than a cloud is a stroke of luck, or a pen is lucky to be on a desk. Luck doesn't come into it because being born is simply the consequence of a process, and is indeed a part of that process. There was never a you, outside the process, hoping to be lucky enough to be born, as a result of the process. So any feeling that you may have, that your birth is lucky, just comes with the benefit of hindsight. It's a retrospective illusion, if you like. Therefore, to call your birth lucky is both erroneous and meaningless. So how do you like that argument? Does it clearly show that in reality you are just a brute fact, and not a lucky event? Well, I don't think the argument is sustainable, because it misses out one very essential component, and that is your consciousness. Consciousness is of course more than a component, it's absolutely fundamental to you, because without it you couldn't be you. It's not peripheral or an add-on. It's you in the most fundamental way. Without it there would be just a bunch of cells that have nothing to do with you. So this is what I mean by your existence. It's your first-person singular consciousness above anything else that I'm referring to. In the most fundamental way, it's what makes you, you. Consciousness can't be equated with a material object like a cloud or a pen that has no semblance of it. But the argument that I have just referred to does just that, which is why I think the argument fails. It talks about your conscious existence as if it can be described as an objective thing, and by doing so, it ignores the subjectivity of it, which is the whole point of it. It's taking away from it what it actually is, and is therefore basing the whole argument on a false premise. Consciousness can't be compared with a cloud, because the difference between them is literally immeasurable. Consciousness is the means by which awareness of anything can occur. A cloud is just an object in that awareness. Maybe you could say that your existence is not strictly down to luck, if you feel the word luck can only be used if your existence was predicted, as in the case of a lottery ticket predicting a lottery win. But it is perfectly acceptable to use the word luck retrospectively, as in, I was lucky to be born to such loving parents. If you consider yourself lucky that you had the parents that you did, you must also have been lucky that they had all the ancestors that were necessary for their existence. And it's still entirely reasonable to ask, if you can accept as feasible, that your very existence could have happened against such odds. The question isn't invalidated with a discussion on semantics. Your first-person singular consciousness is completely unique, isn't it? It's the foundation of anything you could experience. And if it is solely based on an arrangement of atoms, the occurrence of it in your case must have been very unlikely. Apart from the requirement for the particular sequence of events that I have been talking about so far, you can also throw into the mix so many other things that needed to happen for your existence. For example, all the people who were involved in your ancestors meeting up, who would outnumber all your ancestors. And how you are dependent on all the weather conditions down the ages, because weather affects timings, and timings can be crucial. The world's weather is intrinsically very chaotic, isn't it? But it had to manifest exactly as it did, every single day, not just for thousands of years, but for hundreds of millions of years. Because if it had not, timings would have been different, and that whole line of circumstances that were necessary for your unique DNA would not have occurred. Then there was the chance positioning of the Earth at exactly the right distance from the Sun for it to sustain life. And the Earth itself was formed after a sequence of random collisions, set off by a massive explosion in the middle of an infinite nothingness, with particles shooting off in all directions with no meaning or purpose whatsoever, or any objective of forming anything at all, let alone you. So if you think your first-person singular consciousness is entirely dependent on a specific combination of atoms, then how could you square this with the completely impossible odds against it happening? How about considering this question when you've got some quiet moments to spare? Maybe on a Sunday morning when having a lie-in, you could just lie there looking at the ceiling and ask yourself searchingly, could it really be true that my birth as the conscious being that I am was 1,000,000 times more unlikely than winning the national lottery jackpot 52 times in a row? And if I had not been born against those incredible odds, I would never have existed at all, in all eternity. If you find yourself doubting that your very existence could have been as unlikely as that, would you not inevitably have to doubt science's narrative on the causes of your existence? And does this not leave open the whole question of your consciousness, that science doesn't satisfactorily explain, according to you, if you are doubting it? But doubting science's explanation of the origin of your consciousness is not a denial of science. You can still accept that science works reasonably and logically from an objective standpoint. Because the question is not about an objective thing that you can stand back and look at, either literally or conceptually, which science does very well. The question relates to that, by which it is possible for you to be aware of anything. Namely your first-person singular consciousness, that science finds impossible to bring into focus as an objective thing. The question relates to what science seems unable to explain, which is the uniqueness of your own consciousness. And so if your consciousness is not the result of a run of luck that is so unlikely as to be virtually impossible, how could it be explained? Maybe an explanation that the mind can understand in the normal way that it understands things is not the way forward. Maybe it needs to be understood differently. Could you think of your consciousness as in essence, a fundamental reality all of its own, that is beyond the principle of cause and effect? Could it perhaps be like the eternal now, that isn't a thing as such, but rather the context of everything that happens? Is your consciousness like now? That remains now, regardless of what happens in now. Is it like how you could say now isn't made of anything, but just is? Is your consciousness a causeless reality that isn't a thing as such, but is nonetheless the basis of your experience of anything? Is it the uncaused context of all your experiences, but which in itself is not an experience? Could discovering the nature of it require a method that doesn't attempt to explain it in terms of cause and effect, or thinking of it as built up from physical components, like a house is constructed from bricks? The fact that you are conscious is surely the most evident thing about yourself, yet consciousness can't be described. Not being able to describe what consciousness actually is central to what's known as the hard problem of consciousness among philosophers and scientists studying the brain. Of course, you can describe conscious experiences that can be shown to correlate to different areas of the brain. But conscious experiences are not the same as consciousness itself, because consciousness itself remains unchanged as a continuous background awareness, while conscious experiences come and go. Consciousness itself is a mystery which can't be understood in terms of structure, like how a house is built with bricks. Could it be that scientists' current approach in trying to understand it is based on a misconception that will always fall short, because it's using a part of the mind that can only work with structure and form? Maybe it will never find a way of bridging the explanatory gap between structure, for example of the brain, and the subjective experience of consciousness. Because what could you make the bridge out of that is not made from yet more structure? Maybe you need to get off the bus going in the direction of ever more concepts, and get on another one, going in the opposite direction. This time, instead of using concepts to try and understand consciousness, you use consciousness itself as the way to find out what it is. Because how could you understand consciousness conceptually when there is no concept for it that you could work with? Although the two buses are going in opposite directions, perhaps what is surprising is that they are both using a similar logic to explore their respective subjects. The logic being that you use the aspect of the mind that most closely matches the subject of your investigation. The science bus heads to get clarity on concepts utilizing the concept-comprehending aspect of the mind, which is excellent at analyzing structures and interactions between objects. The other bus heads for clarity on consciousness, using consciousness itself as the tool by which the research is undertaken. It's that part of the mind that recognizes, yes, I am conscious, even though I don't understand it conceptually. The awareness of the truth of it is what is used to explore it. Consciousness, after all, has credibility for truth, because who could deny their own consciousness? Getting on the bus to finding out what your consciousness is implies dropping the idea that consciousness can be explained in terms of cause and effect, like billiard balls bumping into one another, with consciousness as eventually explainable as a very complicated arrangement of little bumps. Or that the only way of understanding it is indirectly. That is to say, with reference to something else with which you measure it. Because how could you understand your own consciousness with just a ruler? Getting on that bus means not being motivated to feel comforted and reassured, because you are looking for what is real and not just what comforts you. It means being as true to yourself as you possibly can, because your journey is dedicated to your own consciousness, which is more truly yourself than anything else could be. As such, it's a commitment to being as honestly your own self that you could honestly be. And it means approaching the subject with humility, because what is pride other than attachment to a conceptual self? The bus is on a journey to what is completely unknown conceptually, yet it is a journey into the only thing you know for sure is true. The journey implies being very single-pointed in your endeavor, and not yielding to the neediness of conceptual thoughts that seem to want so much approval. The consciousness research workers on the bus to discovering what consciousness is are arguably on the most interesting mission of all, with the question uppermost in their mind being, who or what am I really, as the pure subjective consciousness that is at the heart of me? They are on a journey to finding out who they ultimately really are, beyond an arrangement of atoms that would be no more likely than winning the lottery every week for 1,000,000 years.